Welcome to the podcast of Ruche and Lofer. Tonight, for our second English edition, we have the pleasure of receiving Hrair Balian, a longtime US president and a former advisor to former President Jimmy Carter in issues of peace resolution. Hrair Balian has unique knowledge and insight on Iran and the region. Therefore, he's a very appropriate guest for tonight to discuss the Israeli, Iranian, and possibly US war that is currently raging. Have an excellent thank you for listening and see you soon. Good evening and welcome to the Ruche and Lofer podcast for our second English edition. Tonight, we are very happy to have as a guest Mr. Hrair Balian, Armenian US resident who has long worked for former President, US President Jimmy Carter. His peace resolution, therefore, is very knowledgeable about what is going on currently in the Middle East and also all the history behind it. We are naturally talking against the backdrop of dramatic developments over in the Middle East with this surprise attack by Israel a little over a week ago on Iran. What is going on is very unsure. We don't know many things. We don't know the extent of the destruction in either of those countries. We don't know the capabilities of either of those countries in continuing this war. We don't know whether or not the US will be involved on a very short term, like tonight, or on the midterm. Basically, we know very little apart from a few images and reels from TV that show hypersonic missiles smashing into Tel Aviv's core. I've just heard a retired US Colonel McGregor saying that the destruction in Tel Aviv is actually a lot higher than Israelis are letting us know, and that apparently damage inside Tel Aviv is very extensive in all sorts of buildings, scientific, military, political, but also civilian, unfortunately. So it's not too much tonight to have Mr. Balian to try and shed some light on this situation, which gives us further headaches, as if we hadn't got enough of them with Gaza and the implications with Syria and Ukraine and everything. It seems like a terrible situation that we're in. US empire seems more and more not only weak and unresoluted, but also unreliable and uncertain of its own power. So the first question that I would have for Mr. Balian tonight is, what, in your opinion, is or was the true goal of the Israeli government in attacking Iran so violently and so suddenly?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. What was the real reason? That's a good question, probably on lots of people's mind, $1 million. I'd say the main purpose of the Israeli aggression in Iran against Iran was regime change to break up Iran eventually. First, before elaborating on the breakup, let's not forget that this aggression took place while a negotiation was underway between the US and Iran on the nuclear issue. And what Israel did was misrepresent the IAEA's conclusion that Iran has been violating some of the provisions or conditions for the enrichment of nuclear material for research purposes. Unfortunately, this is something that we're seeing around the world these days. Aggression while negotiations are underway. This is not the first example, the first time. Either the international community, those more hawkish approach to international relations are sabotaging negotiations so that they can move on aggression. One example is Ukraine on that. Or while negotiations are underway, military is chosen. One example is Nagorno-Karabakh in Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict back in 2020 and 2023, with a ethnic cleansing. Now, while the negotiations were underway between the U.S. and Iran, Israel tries to sabotage. In my view, Israel is trying to
But I'm sorry to jump in, but that's
please.
typical BB tactics. He's constantly trying to force the hand of America into yet another conflict that makes it impossible for America to withdraw its support from Israel. Because I understand that BB has personal legal issues to deal with and a potential removal from power. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, without American
Criminal
support,
issues.
yeah,
Very criminal
American
issues. Yes,
support,
corruption.
without American support, he's like a sitting duck. So he absolutely needs to constantly force America to be involved in any conflict, as long as America keeps providing ammunition and support.
I would say rather than instead of because of American support, I would say this without the support of the right wing, the extreme right wing in Israel, Bibi is exposed to his government falling and eventually himself coming in front of the Israeli courts that have several cases against him. But I want to go back to 2009 when Bibi became prime minister for the second time in Israel. Let's not go back all the way to the 90s. In 2009, when Bibi came to the prime ministership, and leadership of Israel, this is when he started already conspiring to bring the U.S. into an attack against Iran, right? So it's nothing new for him. It's a golden opportunity. Was a golden opportunity to bring the U.S. in the aggression. The U.S. has not entered yet in the attack against Iran. U.S. has facilitated the attack, surely, with the weapons that it has provided to Israel, but the U.S. has not yet provided the key weapon that Israel is looking for, and that is the bunker buster bombs that Israel does not have. I forget what it's called, the 30,000-pound bombs. B-52s are needed to bring them.
If we go back to the root causes, of all this, there is this perception which is widespread in Israel. I lived 5 years in Israel, and each and every Israeli I know, except for a few, actually the people, the only people who may have a diverging option on this notion that the Mollahs in Iran, the regime in Iran, wakes up every morning with the idea, how can we destroy the Zionist entity, as they say, namely Israel. The only people who may differ, who have sort of a different view, are actually former head of intelligence, former head of Mossad, whom I knew very well. They were like, how come we cannot establish a back channel with Iran? But otherwise, the perception is totally widespread that Iran wants to destroy the Zionist entity. And this is a justification which is being used and accepted all over the Western world for the action that is being carried out. Now, you've mentioned aggression. I'm not sure how many countries in the world have described the Israeli attack as aggression. So my a bit provocative question to you, Hrair, not a legitimate justification for the Israelis to remove an existential threat on the survival of Israel?
Well, first we have to establish whether or not there is an existential threat on Israel coming from Iran. Yes, Iranian leaders have made uncareful comments in the past, which can be interpreted as an existential threat towards Israel. I would consider those comments more emotional comments than an existential threat against Israel. I don't think. Yes, I mean, there's no question that Iran is totally pro-Palestinian, pro the oppressed people under the Israeli occupation and rule. And yes, Iran has very severely criticized Israel, as other countries have done, even in the BRICS. Even BRICS countries have criticized Israel on its policy towards the Palestinians. But I think the whole myth about throwing Israel in the Mediterranean, that is an existential threat to Israel, is just that, a myth. I think it's a myth. Okay.
Okay.
And the fact that
can I just interject something? Yes,
please.
It's certainly a myth. I think that over the years there was this idea that, as Jean-Daniel was pointing out, that the Mollahs were waking up every morning like how to destroy Israel. Now we are almost 2 years into the war against Gaza, which has alienated huge amounts of people violently against Israel, even inside Jewish circles in America. We have seen prominent people on the US conservative right. I'm talking about people like Tucker Carlson, like Candace Owen, Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like that starting to turn against Israel, meaning against Trump's policy for Israel, and criticizing Israel with, like, in no uncertain terms. Entire Middle East, which for decades was living with Israel as a problem, but could live with that problem, now seems to be less and less willing to live with that problem. So I wonder if this obsession of the Israelis against the obsession of Iran to destroy Israel is not turning into a real obsession.
It is an obsession. It is a real obsession. But let me make one comment on the entire Arab world standing up against Israel. I don't see that. The Arab streets may very well be standing up against Israel. No, I wouldn't call it an Israeli war on Gaza. I would call it Israeli genocide in Gaza that is being committed. And I use this word very, very knowingly. I'm a lawyer. I understand what a genocide is, and I know what the elements of genocide is. All you have to do is listen to Israeli leaders' comments as to what they're doing and why they're doing, to come up with the notion that yes, this is what the intent is: genocide, to eliminate Palestinians from Israel and then eventually from the West. I mean, the same fate is waiting for the West Bank, but that's another issue. So, yes.
May I interject something? My time here. Are we not seeing the fulfillment of the strategy which has been spelled out by Netanyahu during the first Trump mandate, which is called the outside-in strategy, meaning getting rid of the Iranian threat, making peace with the Arab states, mostly Saudi Arabia, that's about the only one left. And thirdly, getting rid of the Palestinian problem, because anyway, none of these Arab leaders truly care for the Palestinian people. And the only missing for the fulfillment of this dream or policy or vision is really the only obstacle is Iran. Mm-hmm. Iran, actually, what was also sort of feeding what you call an obsession is that the fact that Iran had created a sort of ring of fire, a network of proxies around Israel, with Syria, with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, with Iraqi militias, with Hamas and other Palestinian groups. Now, this ring of fire has been largely destroyed. There is only the heart of the problem, which has to be destroyed. And then the Israelis, and probably the Arab leaders also, will finally be able to fulfill that dream, that vision, that strategy, which is an alliance of the Sunni Arab monarchies together with Israel. Am I out of place there?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. But the way in which Israel is acting now is to alienate those who have signed the Abraham Accords with Israel, to either back from it or even to the extent of reneging this agreement, because it's impossible for many Arab states to thus justify any level of relationship with Israel while the genocide in Gaza is taking place.
So they are happy that they smash Iran, but they have a problem. They have a problem because of the sympathy of their own population. Often many Palestinians, Jordan, but also the Emirates, Qatar.
Yeah,
a lot of the, let's say, the skilled working class come from Palestinian engineers and doctors and so on. Mm-hmm. So that's rather the problem. So what I'm trying to say is that my perspective today is that the Netanyahu plan, which is not new, which has 15 or 20 years, is being fulfilled with the full support of the West, and may lead actually to some stability in the Middle East. Let's say in the Levant, at least, taking into account that the fate of the Palestinian people is more tragic than ever.
I don't see stability being established in the Middle East, even the greater Middle East, even less so in the greater Middle East, by the way in which Netanyahu is moving around. I mean, I don't see that stability as a stability. On the contrary, we're moving towards more stability in the Middle East. If Iran is in fact dismembered, if Iran, at the very least, Iran has internal violence, civil war, as a result of this Israeli interventions with various minorities in Iran. The repercussions of that will be spreading to the Middle East, not only Middle East, but also neighboring countries of Iran in the east, north, and south.
Yes.
What could be the mechanics?
History is really full of examples of that. I mean, the decision to dismantle Assad's regime, the decision to destroy Iraq, all of that was based on the idea that they were ruled by bloodthirsty dictators, but it only led to worse. I live in a country, Serbia, where there was a dictator, and against which the US started a bombing campaign with the aim to free Kosovo, but also to remove Milosevic from power. We know 25 years later, this bombing campaign, from the result on the ground, is not a smart thing. The people of Serbia, as much as they wanted to get rid of their dictator, but by the way, they did it by themselves, they didn't want to be bombed. They didn't care for being bombed for 78 days. And they didn't think that this was a very good way to instill democracy and human rights. And there were some things so blatantly contradictory about that they ended up now being probably even more nationalist than they used to be. I'm talking about an older generation. The younger generation is much more hopeful, as much as I can see. But I think the tactic of saying the Mollah is a very evil regime, let's just get rid of it with the help of a few missiles. Anyway, they're weak. Is an extremely dangerous bet, because what you're doing immediately on the ground is you're solidifying the population again around its power, rather than
whenever you have regime change as a result of an exterior intervention, inevitably the intervention produces a disaster, just a regime change.
But
inevitably.
Can we not imagine a situation? I think the people in Washington, at least from what I hear, the experts are very well aware that they should not repeat the mistakes made in Libya or Iraq, and trying to bring the Shah or Shalabi or, the little puppet and then to impose over the people. I hope they have learned. But the alternative that they may be looking after, is even more risky. Because what they could do is to feed the separatism, or let's say the discontent that you may have among certain of the minorities in Iran. And let's not forget, you have, maybe you can tell us what could be those mechanics of how to sort of motivate and which minorities could be interested to contribute to the chaos, which could be also one of the objectives of this whole operation. Just chaos.
But the chaos will not be limited to Iran. The chaos will spill out to the neighboring countries, just like the chaos in Iraq spilled out to the neighboring countries from 2003. And I mind you, we're still dealing with that chaos today in the immediate region around Iraq. Let's not forget that.
In all of Europe,
would the Kurdish minority Iran take the arms, or the Azeri minority in Iran take the arms?
More than the Kurdish minority is very weak in Iran, very divided. The Azeri minority in Iran could destabilize the whole country. They're far more united than the Kurdish or other minorities.
We're talking about something around 30% of the population.
We're talking about between 20 and 30 million people in a country of 90 million.
We have even heard recently this spring something I'd never heard of appeared in some of the media, which is a liberation movement of the Baluchistan. I cannot believe that this was not sort of triggered or fed by some people who are interested in destabilizing Iran.
Yeah, I don't have facts about it. I would not be surprised if it is externally instigated.
And by the way, that may be one of the reasons why the Pakistani government has been so vocal in favor of Iran. Because Baluchistan are sort of on both sides of the border. No?
I'm hesitating because the Pakistani head of the military was in the U.S. just in the last few days, 2-3 days. And unusually for a military leader, he met with Trump, President Trump, in the White House. So there is no readout other than just the routine stuff, but there's no readout in terms of what was discussed, why a military chief of Pakistan could meet with Trump in this period of time.
It shows how much importance the Americans attach to the position of Pakistan today.
Absolutely. A neighbor of Iran.
Neighbor of Iran, who took a very strong position against the Israeli attacks early on.
Just 1 second. I'm not sure who took that position in Pakistan. Was it the military chief or some politician?
No, that was the government.
The government.
Pakistan is a complex country.
Very, very complicated country.
I would like to maybe to focus on the US. You live in the United States. Do you see a difference in
Unfortunately.
You can move to Switzerland if you or to Serbia.
I'd love to.
Would you see any change in the attitude of the American people, and especially of the American political class, towards Israel?
Look, in the last several months, since the Gaza war, the Gaza genocide started, but in particular, say, in the last 6 months, since Trump's election to the presidency, we have seen a growing pro-Palestinian, I wouldn't say anti-Israeli, but anti-Israeli constituency and protests in the U.S., to which the new U.S. government, the Trump administration, has been reacting very, very strongly by threatening students with deportation, not threatening, but actually deporting students who have participated in various protests on campuses, even threatening universities, elite universities such as Columbia, Harvard, all sorts of consequences if they don't curb the anti-Israeli or pro-Palestinian protests on the campus, which reminds me, I'm old enough to remember back in the 70s, the anti-Vietnam War protests in the U.S.
You participated in the anti-Vietnam War.
Oh yes, I went to jail for
But do you think that this sort of changes we see that also in the public opinion polls, by the way, in the U.S. Could that in 10 years, in one generation, constitute or create a policy change? Because we can say that so far the Israeli governments have provided a blind support to the Netanyahu government ever since 2009. Can we expect a change in 10, 15, 20 years because of the public opinion, because of the youth?
Look, unfortunately, I'm extremely pessimistic as to where the U.S. is heading under the Trump administration, with all the freedoms that it's taking to curb democracy, etc., in the U.S. Even more disappointed with the opposition, meaning the Democratic Party and anyone around it, for 6 months who have not been able to bring their act together to mount a credible resistance to Trump's steps that Trump has been taking. What I fear most is, this may be an extreme, but I really fear Trump's intentions on what he will do and what he can do in 4 years' time when it's time to again presidential elections. I'm afraid Trump and the people around him are not going anywhere in 2028, in particular if the Democrats continue. And it may get too late for the Democrats to get organized and start a resistance against Trump in another month or 2 or 3. So it may already be too late.
I have to absolutely agree with you. I think that there is something deeply disturbing in this first 6 months of presidency of Trump. There was something for me not disturbing, but utterly disqualifying from any position of power for Trump since January 6th, 2020. For me, that was the watershed moment, these 3 hours and 15 minutes during which Trump did nothing to stop the riot. And that for me was a very clear indicator that he did not care for the institutions, for the American people. He did not care for democracy. He cared for personal power. And I think that this guy is not very much interested in what is going on in Iran, in Gaza, and in Ukraine. The blunders that he does in Ukraine, the way he deals with Putin, the way he has been smacked across the face with his China tariffs policy, all of this indicates that for him, this is almost like a chore. It's boring. What really interests him is domestic politics. He only uses foreign policy, in my view, to feed of his own power.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, according to what I see of what is going on in the US, I will put it very bluntly, I think he's more interested in civil war than in international wars. I think this is a guy that we can fear can bring a conflict within the US. By the way, has already happened, so this would not be the first time. And I really think that this guy has no plan. And I've read a lot of papers that say we have to wait, we have to be patient. He's thinking about something. He's thinking about nothing. And I think he's got no plans. He's only interested to stay in power as long as, regardless of the constitution, regardless of anything. And I think he is the real danger today in the world. That was
the 2020 elections. In the 20 elections when Biden won, I've expressed my view to the media in the US that what I've seen in international conflicts, whether it's in the Balkans, in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Caucasus, etc., I'm seeing the same things repeating in the US very dangerously. What I'm talking about is the following: demonizing your opponent, to political protest armed,
demonizing your opponents and your friends.
Yes, yes, yes. Anyone who speaks against you, anyone who
even
is
your friends.
who you think.
He demonized Denmark. He demonizes France and Britain. They are their allies.
Yeah, I would say his friends, the allies abroad, sort of, he couldn't care less. But demonizing in the domestic politics, demonizing your opposition is a telltale sign of trouble to come in countries where I have worked, gaining in the Balkans, the Middle East, Africa, and the Caucasus. And I saw the same and many other indicators, such as demonizing your opponent. Many of these indicators started appearing in the U.S. electoral campaign, including car ramming in election rallies, coming to election rallies armed with war weapons, MR6 or whatever, 16 or whatever it's called, etc. And some reporters first started sort of, what are you talking about? Because they had never seen an international conflict. And eventually, people started seeing that, yes, this is exactly what's happening in this country. And I think we're again repeating the same kind of politics internally within the US. And as we get closer to the next elections, we just finished with one election, but the next one is just on the horizon. As we get close to that, I think we're going to see a lot more polarization in US politics. And with more polarization like the one we've seen, I think the risk for violence in the US will increase.
Yes.
Dangerous.
It's also very clear how much I'm now in France, and I see how the public discourse that you see from the newspapers, on the streets, in the kiosks, the type of speech that is pervading everywhere is so anxious, so one-sided, so violent in a way, and everybody's like, screaming for, like, yes, there is war in Iran, it's fantastic, we will destroy this regime. And it's a bit disconcerting. Shouldn't you be worried that there is a war that you don't control, that you're not even participating in, that you don't even understand the premises of? And there is this sort of like...
And one of the targets is nuclear weapons, nuclear material.
Yes.
One of the targets.
Yes. So I do feel there is a sense in the West, a loss of... I don't know, of principles, of attitudes. There's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, and I feel that these people don't really know what the world looks like that they're so to lead.
Yeah, I agree.
Could you seen from Washington or the US? I mean, that's something which amazes me is how much European leaders have been following the policies which have been decided upon by Mr. Netanyahu himself and his team. And you have countries like Germany, France, except Spain, Ireland, Slovenia, maybe Belgium, Norway. All of the others follow blindly the policy lines and policy objectives defined by Mr. I don't see any rational explanation for that. Do you see the feeling from Washington? Does that mean Europeans just don't matter because they have no backbone and no autonomous or independent thinking?
I think Europe has always had this guilt feeling. Is there a problem?
I don't know.
I'm here. It's all
Go
good.
on.
Okay. I think Europe has always had this complex, shall we say, of
guilty
World
feeling.
War II, and this guilt feeling that is motivating its politics whenever it comes to Israel. That's been a case, I think, for a long time, and I think it is continuing. The second thing is the U.S. has had a tendency on critical issues to follow the U.S. Lead, whether it's defense through security issues through NATO, otherwise it's following the U.S. Lead with an unpredictable bullying such as Trump in the U.S. Perhaps the Europeans are just very timid to contradict Trump. I mean, one final thing on this is that Trump came to power in the U.S. by announcing of America First. Now there are Trump supporters who are asking to Trump, is it really America first or Israel first with this policy?
Yes, that's, I think, the main concern that Israel should have, but doesn't seem to be really conscious of. When you speak to Israeli people in Israel and you tell them, are you aware how much in the West and in the US you are losing ground? You are alienating the support that is crucial for you, the support that you're depending on at every level. And I have the impression Israeli is not quite aware of that.
We lost part of it. Yeah.
Yes, but at the end of the day, the question is Netanyahu on the winning side or not? And my bet is today, and for the foreseeable, Israeli government under Netanyahu is on the winning side. What will happen with Netanyahu, with his criminal case in Israel and so on, I don't know. But what I can see is that his vision of Israel and its relations with its neighbors, including the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, is coming true. And this is a major shift in the value system of the West, because we are supporting these policies. Nobody can really dispute that we are not supporting these policies. And therefore, it will be very difficult, I believe, to defend those principles like human rights, international humanitarian law, even international justice, anywhere else in the world, after having failed so miserably in defending our principles in the case of Israel-Palestine and in the case of Israel-Iran.
Yeah, I agree. At least in the last 10, 15 years, we've been, I think the international relations and the so-called rules-based international has been on a sliding downhill steadily for the past 10, 15
I would say 20 years. For
20
me,
years.
the turning point was Iraq.
I agree.
Zero justification to attack Iraq. Everybody knew that. It was clear that the whole thing was based on lies. French and the German, but the French and the German back then, they resisted. And they said, not in our name. You don't bring, on n'apporte pas la démocratie au bout des cannes. And then the George Bush father wars were legal. There were Security Council resolutions. And even maybe Kosovo is an exception.
But it was not Security Council.
There
it was
was
NATO
no
decision.
There was NATO decision.
Yeah.
And no Security Council resolution. But I think the real turning point for me was Iraq. And from a world order based on the law, on international law, has been degrading and degrading. And today, I think nobody even tried to defend international law.
Today, might makes right, fortunately. We're back to the primitive periods in our history where might decided everything.
Yes, except
With
that
no
today might is extremely disruptive.
Dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah, agree.
On this gloomy note and fearing for the technicalities of this podcast, I think it's time, unfortunately, to call this to an end. And thanking you again for your really very, very insightful comments. I hope this podcast will make it. There seem to be having a little bit glitches, but we'll hope for the best. Thank you again for your participation, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you for including me in this discussion.
Thank you very much, Hrair. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.